Let's understand factors affecting cardiac output. So, as you have learned in the previous lecture, cardiac output is the product of the stroke volume and the heart rate. Because stroke volume is the amount of the blood that is ejected by each ventricle per beat, and when we multiply it with the heart rate or the cardiac cycle per minute, it gives the amount of the total blood flow by both the ventricle per minute. So the cardiac output, it is the product of stroke volume multiplied with heart rate. So now I am going to explain all the factors affecting cardiac output. So I think it should be obvious that all the factors affecting stroke volume and all the factors affecting heart rate, they can alter cardiac output. So now I will explain all the factors that can affect stroke volume. So the factors affecting stroke volume. So first of all, to understand all the factors affecting stroke volume, you must remember that heart is a central pump and it pumps blood towards the peripheral circulation. So blood flows towards the heart in the form of the venous return, then cardiac muscle contracts and it forces the blood into the systemic circulation. So all the factors that can affect the blood flow towards the heart, all the factors that affect the contraction of the heart, as well as factors affecting flow of the blood from heart towards the peripheral circulation, all these factors they can affect stroke volume. So the stroke volume, it depends on three major factors, and they are preload, myocardial contractility, and the afterload. Preload. Preload is the load which is acting on the cardiac muscle before the contraction of the myocyte occurs. In the simple terms, it is the end diastolic volume or the venous return. Myocardial contractility or the contraction of the myocyte can also affect stroke volume. And the afterload. Afterload is the load which is acting on the cardiac myocyte after the contraction of the cardiac muscle begins. So it is the resistance offered to the ventricular output. So these are the three major factors affecting stroke volume: preload, myocardial contractility, and the afterload. The first factor which affect the stroke volume, it is preload. So the end diastolic volume, or the volume which is remaining inside the ventricle at the end of the diastole, it is considered as preload because this is the amount of the blood which is acting as a load against the myocyte before the contraction of the heart begins. That's why it is known as preload. Now, increase in the end diastolic volume increases the stroke volume, and decrease in the end diastolic volume, it decreases stroke volume. Now, this can be explained by Frank Starling's law of the heart, and it states that within physiological limit, the force of the contraction is directly proportional to the initial length of the muscle fiber. Now, in this definition, the initial length of the muscle fiber, it means the length of the muscle fiber prior to the ventricular contraction. Now, this initial length, it depends on the level of the stretch of the ventricular muscle at the end of the diastole. And as you all know, this level of the stretch of the ventricular muscle at the end of the diastole, it depends on the end diastolic volume. So as the end diastolic volume increases, it increases the level of the stretch of the ventricular muscle and it increases initial length of the myocytes. Now the increase in the initial length, it stretches the sarcomere and it increases the optimal length of the sarcomere. Sarcomere, as you all know, it contains actin and myosin filament. Now excessive stretching of the sarcomere It disrupts the overlapping of the actin and myosin filament, and it cannot generate the proper force of contraction. So that is the physiological limit. So up to optimal length, it can generate the maximum active force of contraction. So whenever initial length increases, it increases the length of the sarcomere. So it reflects the relationship between the end diastolic fiber length and the force of contraction. Because in this regulation, there is change in the initial length of the myocyte. It is also known as heterometric autoregulation. So metric of the myocyte or the initial length of the myocyte, it is altered or it changes. So that's why it is also known as heterometric autoregulation. So now it is clear that the preload is because of the end diastolic volume. Because end diastolic volume, it changes the initial length of the cardiac myocyte. Now, which are the various factors that can affect end diastolic volume itself? So here we can see the three major factors that can affect end diastolic volume. First is the venous return. So whenever venous return increases, it can increase more blood flow towards the heart and it can increase the end diastolic volume. Atrial pump activity, it also contributes to the ventricular filling. So atrial pump activity also contributes to the end diastolic volume. And the third factor is within the ventricular myocyte itself. It is the ventricular compliance. It is the degree of the stretchability or the expansion of the ventricular muscle itself. So these are the three major factors: venous return, atrial pump activity, and ventricular compliance. They can affect the end diastolic volume. Venous return is the amount of the blood that returns to the right atrium from the systemic venous circulation. Now the venous return, it also depends on various factors like the skeletal muscle pump, thoracic pump, and the respiratory activity, abdominal pump because of the abdominal muscle contraction, total amount of the extracellular fluid volume, and the sympathetic activity. These are the various factors which can affect the venous return. So let's understand how all these factors they can alter the venous return towards the heart, which can change the end diastolic volume. Skeletal muscle pump. As the name suggests, it is the pumping activity by the skeletal muscle. So here we can see the skeletal muscles and the vein passing through the skeletal muscle. As we all know, in the structure of the vein contain valves and it can direct blood flow only towards the heart. So whenever muscle is contracted, the contracted muscle it compresses the venous reservoir present inside the muscle and it forces the blood from the vein towards the heart. And whenever blood is relaxed, then all the valves they are closed and it prevents backflow of the blood towards the relaxed part. So contraction of the muscle it forces the blood towards the heart. In this manner it acts as a pump, and this activity it is known as skeletal muscle pumping activity. With the increase in the skeletal muscle pumping activity or during the exercise, the blood flow towards the heart increases, and whenever the skeletal muscle activity is less, then venous return towards the heart it is less. Whenever quiet standing is for the prolonged duration, then it causes peripheral pooling of the blood and it decreases venous return towards the heart and it decreases the cardiac output. So in all the personnel with the quiet standing for a prolonged period, it can decrease the cardiac output. For example, in the traffic police, they have a longer duration as a standing position, which causes peripheral pooling of the blood. And because of the peripheral pooling of the blood and decrease in the venous return, it can reduce the cardiac output and decrease blood flow towards the brain. After the prolonged standing position, it can cause fainting. So it is always advisable that whenever person is exposed to the quiet standing for a longer duration of time, intermittent skeletal muscle activities they should be promoted to prevent fainting. So it should be clear that the skeletal muscle pumping activity it can increase the venous return and end diastolic volume, which can increase the cardiac output. The second factor is the thoracic pump activity. So thoracic pump activity is the pumping activity by the contribution of the thorax. So during the inspiration, venous return to the heart increases because the thorax during the inspiration it increases the anteroposterior as well as the horizontal diameter because of the elevation of the rib. Also because of the contraction of the diaphragm, vertical diameter also increases. So during the respiration, particularly during the inspiration, whenever all this diameter, anteroposterior, horizontal as well as the vertical diameter increases, it expands the thoracic cage. Now, as we all know, according to the Boyle's law, pressure and the volume they are inversely related. So whenever the volume of the cavity increases, it decreases the pressure inside it. So because of the expansion of the thorax, the pressure inside the thorax it decreases and it also decreases the central venous pressure. And because of this pressure difference, blood flow from the peripheral veins towards the central vein and towards the heart. So in this manner, thoracic pump activity during the inspiration, it increases the venous return, and during the expiration, it decreases venous return towards the heart. Third factor which can increase the venous return and the end diastolic volume is the abdominal pump. Here we can see the movement of the diaphragm during the inspiration as well as the expiration. So during the inspiration, ribs they are elevated which can increase the diameter of the thorax. Along with that, diaphragm contracts and the lowering of the diaphragm it increases the abdominal pressure. So this increase in the abdominal pressure it compresses the intra-abdominal vessel which pushes the blood towards the heart, and this pumping activity it is known as abdominal pump. So both this thoracic pump and abdominal pump during the inspiration it pumps the blood from the veins towards the central vein and towards the heart. Fourth factor is the cardiac pump. It is because of the pumping activity of the heart. Now this pumping activity of the heart it is also helpful to increase the venous return towards the heart. Here you have to understand two terms, vis a turbo and vis a fronti. First, the vis a turbo. Vis a turbo, it is a force from behind which drives the blood forward. So it is a propelling force. So because of the contraction of the heart which act as a propelling force which forces the blood during its passage through the heart, and when the blood it enters in the systemic circulation because of the elastic recoil of the arterial wall it ensures higher pressure in the systemic circulation, and because of the higher pressure in the systemic circulation blood flows from the large vessels like aorta to the arteries to the capillaries and to the venules, and because of the pressure difference blood flows from the aorta up to the great veins and towards the right atrium. So this is a propelling force which ensures high pressure in the systemic circulation, and because of this pressure difference blood flows towards the atrium also. So because of this cardiac pumping activity, venous return it is also maintained. Second is the vis affronti. Vis affronti is a force acting from the front to attract the blood in the veins towards the heart. So this is a suction force, and this suction force it increases the venous return and the end diastolic volume. It occurs during the various phases of the cardiac cycle, and because of that it increases the venous return. For example, ventricular systolic suction and the ventricular diastolic suction. Ventricular systolic suction it occurs during the systole, and ventricular diastolic suction it occurs during the diastole. Ventricular systolic suction it occurs because of the contraction of the ventricles, and because of the contraction of the ventricle as a whole it also lowers the AV valve, and the diameter of the great vessel it increases, and because of that pressure inside the atria decreases. So blood flows from the great veins towards the atria. So because of the ventricular systolic suction, venous return increases. Second is the ventricular diastolic suction. It occurs during the diastole of the ventricle. So when ventricular muscle it relaxes, pressure inside the ventricle rapidly decreases. And because of the opening of the mitral valve or the atrioventricular valve, blood flows from the atria inside the ventricles. So during the diastole, venous return is increased. So both this ventricular systolic suction as well as the ventricular diastolic suction, they are also helpful for the movement of the blood from the great vessels towards the heart, and this is known as cardiac pumping activity that can increase venous return also. Venous return also depends on the extracellular fluid volume, and in the extracellular fluid volume it particularly depends on the plasma volume. So whenever plasma volume decreases, for example in diarrhea, in vomiting, which produces dehydration, and this loss of the extracellular fluid volume, it decreases the venous return and the cardiac output. In condition with the increase in the plasma volume, such as in the pregnancy, in this condition, cardiac output increases. So whenever extracellular fluid volume increases, it increases venous return and the cardiac output. And when extracellular fluid volume decreases, it decreases venous return and the cardiac output. Sympathetic activity also affects venous return. So sympathetic stimulation, it produces vasoconstriction and it increases the cardiac output. Sympathetic stimulation also produces venoconstriction, and the constriction of the vein it decreases the capacitance of the venous reservoir, and it can increase the venous return. So sympathetic stimulation it increases venous return, and sympathetic inhibition it produces vasodilatation and dilatation of veins. So because of the venodilatation, it produces peripheral pooling of the blood and it decreases venous return towards the heart. So always remember, sympathetic stimulation, it increases venous return, and sympathetic inhibition, it decreases venous return towards the heart. So now let us summarize. So cardiac output, it depends on preload, afterload and the myocardial contractility. Preload, it depends on end diastolic volume, and the end diastolic volume it depends on venous return, atrial pump activity and ventricular compliance. Till now I have explained all the factors affecting venous return. So the venous return it depends on pumping activity by the muscle or the skeletal muscle pump, thoracic pump, cardiac pump and abdominal pumping activity. Other factors are extracellular fluid volume and the sympathetic stimulation. After the venous return, other factors that affect the end diastolic volume, they are atrial pump activity and the ventricular compliance. Now let's understand about the atrial pump activity. So as you all know, the atrial pump, it contributes to 50 to 20 percentage of the ventricular filling during the cardiac cycle. Now it usually contributes less, but whenever there are conditions with the increased demand of the cardiac output is there, at that time right atrial contraction, it is helpful because it contributes to 50 to 20 percentage of the filling of the ventricles. So atrial pump activity, it also contributes to the end diastolic volume. Ventricular compliance is the compliance of the ventricle. Compliance is the stretchability. So ventricular muscle is compliant enough to accommodate adequate blood during the diastole, and normally the end diastolic volume is 130 ml. If any pathological condition which affect the ventricular compliance or its ability to accommodate blood inside it, it can affect the cardiac output. For example, in the cardiomyopathies and infiltrative diseases of the heart, it decreases ventricular compliance. Pericardial effusion, it can affect the stretchability or the ability of the ventricle to accommodate blood inside it, and because of that end diastolic volume decreases, and decrease in the end diastolic volume decreases the cardiac output. Whenever massive pericardial effusion is there, which is known as cardiac tamponade, it can severely affect the end diastolic volume and the cardiac output. So whenever ventricular compliance is affected, it also affects the cardiac output. Now after the preload, the second factor that affects the stroke volume is myocardial contractility. Now here you have to understand the difference between the myocardial contractility and the force of contraction, because preload, it increases force of contraction of the heart, and the myocardial contractility, it means the ventricles, they are able to do more work per stroke at a given ventricular and diastolic pressure. So the ventricles, they develop tension more rapidly. Myocardial fiber, they shorten quickly. Ejection of the blood is faster, and duration of the myocardial contraction is brief, and rate of the ventricular relaxation is also fast. So these are the various factors that affect the contraction of the myocyte itself. It doesn't depend on the end diastolic volume. So this is the difference between the myocardial contractility and the force of contraction. Now the factors affecting myocardial contractility. So myocardial contractility, it is termed as inotropy. So whenever myocardial contractility, it is increased by certain factor, then they are known as positive inotropic factors, and factors that decrease the myocardial contractility, they are known as negative inotropic agents. Now the myocardial contractility, it depends on the activity of the myocytes. So myocardial contractility, it depends on ventricular muscle mass or the myocyte itself. Now muscle mass, it is affected by state of the autonomic activity or the innervation by the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. Now activity of the myocyte, it is also affected by concentration of various hormones and chemicals in the blood. It is also affected by drugs, and the myocardial contractility, it is also altered by the heart rate. So these are the various factors that can affect the myocardial contractility: muscle mass, autonomic activity, neurohumoral factors, drugs, and heart rate. Role of the ventricular muscle mass in the myocardial contractility. So as we all know, the myocytes, they generate tension in the walls of the heart and it produces the stroke work. So whenever ventricular muscle mass it increases stroke work and the cardiac output, and when ventricular muscle mass it decreases, it can produce less tension and the less stroke work. Ventricular muscle mass it decreases in various pathological conditions like in the myocardial infarction. In the myocardial infarction, it produces infarction and the necrosis of the myocyte, which results in loss of the ventricular muscle mass. In conditions like cardiomyopathy, muscle atrophy occurs. It can also result in the decrease in the ventricular muscle mass. So whenever ventricular muscle mass it decreases, in this condition, cardiac output is also decreased. Now, whenever ventricular muscle mass is increased, then within physiological limits, it can increase the cardiac output. So, the common physiological condition of increased ventricular muscle mass is regular practice of the physical exercise. And regular physical exercise, it produces physiological hypertrophy of the myocyte, which can increase the stroke work and the cardiac output. Exercise increases the workload on the heart, so heart pumps more amount of the blood to the various body tissues to meet their metabolic demand. So whenever body is exposed to enhanced period of energy expenditure or the exercise for a longer duration of the time, it produces physiological hypertrophy of the cardiac muscle. In athletes, they perform the regular physical activity, it results in the hypertrophy of cardiac muscle, which increases their cardiac output. Now, in athletes, resting cardiac output is also more because of the increase in the stroke volume, and their resting heart rate is less because of the increase in the vagal tone. So in the athletes, cardiac output it increases during exercise mainly by increasing the stroke volume rather than the heart rate. And in the non-athlete individuals, cardiac output is mainly increased by increase in the heart rate rather than increase in the stroke volume. Now, after the cardiac myocytes or ventricular muscle mass, let's understand about other factors that affect the myocardial contractility. These are the various neurohumoral factors. Now, these neurohumoral factors they can increase or decrease the myocardial contractility. Now, first I will explain all the factors causing increase in the myocardial contractility. Now, this factor which increases the myocardial contractility, they shift the Frank-Starling curve to the left side. So, first of all, understand about the Frank-Starling curve. Frank-Starling curve, it describes the relationship between the ventricular and diastolic volume and the stroke volume. So as the end diastolic volume increases, then stroke volume increases according to the Frank-Starling's law. Always remember that the Frank-Starling's law, it operates in the heterometric regulation. Here we are talking about the myocardial contractility and we are trying to understand the relationship between the end diastolic volume and the stroke volume in all the factors which alters the myocardial contractility. This is a frequently asked question in MCQ in your UG exam as well as in the pre-PG examinations. So first of all, the sympathetic stimulation. Sympathetic stimulation, it increases the myocardial contractility by acting on the beta 1 adrenergic receptors. Catecholamine, they also exert their positive inotropic effect via acting on the beta 1 adrenergic receptors. By acting on the beta 1 adrenergic receptor, it increases cyclic AMP, which increases availability of the calcium in the myocytes, and calcium, it promotes contractility of the myocardium, which increases stroke volume. So all the factors that increases the myocardial contractility like the sympathetic stimulation and the catecholamine, they shift the Frank-Starling curve to the left side. So for a given ventricular and diastolic volume, always remember, for the given ventricular and diastolic volume, stroke volume increases in the all the factors affecting myocardial contractility. Now, other factors they are xanthine. Xanthine it is present in the caffeine and theophylline. It exerts their positive inotropic effect by inhibiting the breakdown of the cyclic AMP. So whenever cyclic AMP is available, then it increases the calcium inside the myocyte, which increases the myocardial contractility. Glucagon, it also causes positive inotropic effect by increases the formation of cyclic AMP. Thyroxine, it also increases the cardiac output. So it is a positive inotropic agent. It increases the cardiac output by three mechanisms. First, it increases the number of the beta 1 receptors in the myocyte. It increases the sensitivity of beta 1 receptor to the catecholamines. And thyroxine, it also increases myosin ATPase activity in the ventricular muscle. So it increases the availability of the cyclic AMP and the calcium in the myocyte. By all the three mechanisms, it promotes myocardial contractility. Digitalis and related drugs, they exert their positive inotropic effect by inhibitory effect on the sodium potassium ATPase in the myocardium. Now the function of the sodium potassium pump is it pumps sodium outside the cell and potassium inside the cell. So whenever sodium potassium ATPase pump is inhibited, it increases intracellular sodium. Now sodium calcium exchanger it is available in the myocyte. So whenever intracellular sodium is increased, it increases intracellular calcium also. So the inhibition of the sodium potassium ATPase pump it increases intracellular calcium and it increases myocardial contractility. This is the action of the digitalis and its related drug. Digitalis is derived from Digitalis purpura. Digitalis purpura is a species of the flowering plant. Here we can see the flowers of the Digitalis purpura. This Digitalis purpura it is also known as foxglove, also known as lady's glove because of its typical appearance. All the part of the plant like leaves, flowers and seeds they contain cardiac glycoside digitoxin. So whenever ingested in large dosage it is usually fatal, but within the pharmacological dosage it is useful as a positive inotropic agent. So again let's summarize factors increasing myocardial contractility or the positive inotropic agents: sympathetic system, catecholamine, xanthine, and theophylline. They increases cyclic AMP and the calcium availability. Glucagon it also increases cyclic AMP and the calcium in the myocyte. Digitalis it is a positive inotropic drug. It inhibits sodium potassium ATPase activity and it increases calcium inside the myocyte. So these are all the positive inotropic agents that can increase myocardial contractility and it increases stroke volume at the given end diastolic volume. Various negative inotropic factors they decrease the myocardial contractility. One of such factor is the parasympathetic stimulation or the vagus nerve stimulation. Now the vagus nerve fibers they are distributed mainly to the atria and not to the ventricles. And because of that stimulation of the vagus nerve it decreases heart rate because of the innervation to the SA node and it also decreases the contractility of the atrial musculature. Now both these factors decrease in the heart rate as well as the negative inotropic effect on the atrial muscle, it indirectly acts as a negative inotropic factor for the ventricular contraction also, and it reduces the strength of the heart contraction up to 20 to 30 percentage. So parasympathetic stimulation is a negative inotropic factor. Heart failure is associated with decrease in the myocardial contractility because of the intrinsic depression of the myocyte, and the myocardial infarction and other myopathies. They are related to the loss of the ventricular muscle mass, which results in the decrease in the myocardial contractility. So heart failure and the myocardial infarction and the myopathies, they act as a negative inotropic factor. Now various chemical factors, they also decreases the myocardial contractility like hypercapnia, hypoxia and acidosis. They produces the negative inotropic effect. This negative inotropic effect because of the decrease in the formation of the cyclic AMP, which decreases the availability of the calcium in the myocyte. So always remember, hypercapnia, hypoxia and acidosis, these are the negative inotropic factors. Various drugs like quinidine, procainamide and barbiturate, they depresses the myocardial contractility and they produce negative inotropic effects. Now let's summarize various factors affecting myocardial contractility or positive as well as the negative inotropic factors. Catecholamines, sympathetic system, xanthine, glucagon and digitalis. These are the positive inotropic factors. Here we can see the relationship between the end diastolic volume and the stroke volume, that is the Frank-Starling's curve. So all the positive inotropic agents, they increases the stroke volume for the given end diastolic volume. So they shift the Frank-Starling curve to the left side because for a given end diastolic volume, stroke volume increases. So it shifts the Frank-Starling's curve to the left side. Now various negative inotropic factors like hypoxia, hypercapnia, acidosis, they depresses the myocardial contractility because of the decreased formation of the cyclic AMP. Various drugs like quinidine, procainamide, barbiturate, myocardial infarction and the heart failure, which results in the loss of the ventricular myocytes as well as the intrinsic depression of the myocardium. Parasympathetic stimulation, it also decreases the myocardial contractility. So all these factors, they decreases the stroke volume for the given end diastolic volume, and because of that it shifts the Frank-Starling's curve to the right side. So always remember that the positive inotropic agents which increases the myocardial contractility, it shifts the Frank-Starling's curve to the left side, and all the negative inotropic agents which decreases the myocardial contractility, it shifts the Frank-Starling's curve to the right side. After the preload and the myocardial contractility, the third factor affecting the stroke volume is the afterload. Now, as the name suggests, afterload is the load against which myocyte contracts. So, it is the force against which ventricular muscle fiber shorten, and it is the peripheral resistance. So obviously, whenever peripheral resistance is more or load against which myocyte has to contract is more, it decreases the stroke volume and the cardiac output. So cardiac output, it is inversely proportional to the afterload. Now cardiac output, it changes without changes in the ventricular muscle length. Therefore, this type of the regulation of the cardiac output is known as homometric autoregulation, and this is also known as end-rep effect. Afterload or the peripheral resistance, it depends on two factors. diameter of the vessel, and viscosity of the blood. So R, or the peripheral resistance, it depends on 8 eta L, where eta is the viscosity, L is the length of the vessel, divided by pi r raised to 4, where r is the radius of the vessel. So peripheral resistance, it is inversely proportional to the fourth power of the radius or the diameter of the vessel. Now first, the vessel diameter. So peripheral resistance, it is inversely proportional to the fourth power of the diameter of the vessel. So vasoconstriction, it increases the peripheral resistance, and vasodilatation, it decreases peripheral resistance. So afterload increases during the vasoconstriction and decreases during the vasodilatation. So vasoconstriction, it increases peripheral resistance and it decreases cardiac output. Second factor affecting the afterload is the viscosity of the blood. Now viscosity of the blood, it is directly proportional to the peripheral resistance. So whenever viscosity of the blood increases, it increases in the peripheral resistance. For example, in the polycythemia. Polycythemia, it increases the viscosity of the blood and it increases peripheral resistance, which decreases the cardiac output. And whenever viscosity of the blood decreases, for example in anemia, it decreases the peripheral resistance and it increases cardiac output. So always remember, whenever viscosity of the blood increases, then it increases peripheral resistance, which affects the cardiac output. So cardiac output, it depends on stroke volume and the heart rate. Till now you have learned about all the factors affecting stroke volume. For example, preload, myocardial contractility, and the afterload. Now let's understand about the factors affecting heart rate. Heart rate is influenced mainly by the autonomic activity by the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic nervous system. The vagal stimulation, it decreases heart rate, and the sympathetic stimulation, it increases heart rate. So the heart rate, it depends mainly on the balance between sympathetic and the parasympathetic influences. Cardiac output is equal to stroke volume multiplied with the heart rate. So whenever heart rate increases, it increases the cardiac output. But unless associated with increase in the venous return or the end diastolic volume, increase in the heart rate may not increase the cardiac output proportionately. Now let's understand it by example. For example, in severe tachycardia or in the extreme exercise. So whenever severe tachycardia occurs, it decreases the duration of the systole and the diastole both. But the duration of the diastole, it is shortened more than the duration of the systole. Therefore, ventricles, they get less time to be filled and it decreases end diastolic volume. So even though heart rates, they are more, end diastolic volume is less. So cardiac output, it does not increase proportionately to that of the increase in the heart rate. So in the severe tachycardia, cardiac output may not increase proportionately with the increase in the heart rate. At the end of this video lecture, you have learned about factors affecting cardiac output. Cardiac output is equal to stroke volume multiplied with heart rate. So all the factors affecting heart rate as well as the stroke volume, they can change the cardiac output. Various factors affecting stroke volume, they are preload, afterload, and the myocardial contractility. So all the factors affecting preload, afterload, and the myocardial contractility, they can also change the cardiac output. This is a very frequently asked question in your exam. Now in the next lecture, I will explain control of the cardiac output. You have learned about all the factors, so it will be a brief information in which I will explain the control of the cardiac output as well as the important MCQs related to this topic. Thank you.